been saying that the Israelis, and specifically Netanyahu, had no cards left to play, no bargaining chips to use, except for the threatened assault on Rafah. Everyone was warning them not to do it. America warned against it, Europe warned against it, Germany, the UK, the UN, everyone was against it. Negotiations have largely moved outside of American jurisdiction. As I've said, ceasefire and hostage exchange negotiations are being carried out by Egypt and by Qatar and with Hamas. The Americans and the Israelis, came up with a ridiculous 40-day ceasefire proposal last week, and everyone just ignored it. Hamas agreed to a ceasefire proposal on Monday that would have secured the release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners over 3 stages. It would have achieved the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, the commencement of reconstruction, all of this over 3 stages, with each of these stages being about 42 days each, so a total of about 4 months. This would have also included a cessation of hostilities by the Houthis, by militias in Iraq, and by Hezbollah, apparently. That was also included. This is the most serious and the most realistic proposal so far. And America even signaled that they were in favor of this ceasefire proposal. But almost immediately after Hamas announced their acceptance of this plan, Israel launched an attack on Rafah. They seized control of the Rafah, the border crossing, and the Philadelphia corridor, so-called, even raising the Israeli flag at the border crossing. All of this, in my opinion, is essentially the Zionists protesting the fact that they can no longer dictate the terms in the Middle East. And all they have left is violence. All they have left, the only way that they can make themselves relevant or significant in any way is to either threaten violence or commit violence. Anything Israel does to try to undermine Hamas will only strengthen Hamas. You can't replay Oslo. You can't rerun that program and not have anyone see what you're doing. No, I think the plan is probably for Hamas and Fatah to form some sort of a unity government over Gaza and have only the Fatah side of that coalition really have any power and influence. But I doubt that that's going to be under the leadership of someone like Abu Mazen. He's going to be sidelined. But the point is, none of this is in Israel's hand anymore. And it's not even in America's hand anymore. Now, I've heard that the ongoing negotiations in Cairo now officially include officials from the CIA, and they're floating this idea of a private American security company managing the border, the Rafah-Egypt border. This is absurd, in my opinion. See, there are factions in the United States, the neocons especially, specifically, who still have not adapted to the new emerging reality of international affairs. So they think that Israel and the United States can still just rely on violence to dictate how things are going to be. They think that Israel's actions in Rafah have somehow changed the dynamics, but they haven't, at least not in the way that they think that they have. They've changed the dynamics only by making the dynamics worse for Israel and worse for America. Wallahi, everything they do these days just isolates them further. I mean, look, the U.S. is going to sanction officials from the International Criminal Court, apparently, or they want to, congressmen want to preemptively punish them for issuing arrest warrants against Netanyahu and top officials of the Israeli cabinet, even though no warrants have actually been issued yet. So this rule of law, rules-based international order country, America, wants to illegally pressure and influence, wants to apply coercion to the International Criminal Court to prevent charges against genocidal criminals who everyone in the world wants to see arrested. Genocidal criminals who just rejected a ceasefire offer and responded to a ceasefire offer by attacking innocent people in Rafah. It's like America hates their own credibility at this point. You know how they used to like to say about the Palestinians that they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity? Well, that's America now. They've had opportunity after opportunity over the past 7 months to actually do the right thing, to actually live up to all their talk about justice and human rights, all the exact same things that they were saying, all the same talk that they were reciting over Ukraine. They could have backed that up with regards to Gaza. All that imaginary performative outrage over civilian casualties in Ukraine, you know, attacks on hospitals, attacks on infrastructure and what have you, not to mention all their talk about democracy and freedom and so on. They could have listened to protesters, to their own youth, to their own people protesting in the streets and now on university campuses. instead of beating them and arresting them, and instead of banning TikTok, because TikTok is providing people all around the world with accurate eyewitness accounts of what's happening in Gaza. They could have hailed that, as a valuable platform for keeping people informed, a platform of free speech. But no, they want to shut it down. They could have called for a ceasefire instead of persistently vetoing ceasefire proposals at the UN. In fact, they didn't even have to go through the United Nations. They could have literally just ordered Netanyahu to stop. And if he didn't, then they could have intervened militarily, just like they would do anywhere else. If America was anything at all like what they say about themselves, if they actually believed in any of the values that they claim to believe in, then more than 35,000 Palestinians would not have been murdered. The only reason they oppose arrest warrants against the Israelis is because they're accomplices themselves. And every member of the Biden administration should be hauled before the Hague for complicity with genocide, and they know it. See, their problem is that the reality is eclipsing the narrative. The stench of Zionist savagery is overpowering the perfume that America sprays on its own reputation to cover their own noxious odor, the stink of the fetid corpse of their so-called democratic society that died long ago, if it was ever alive to begin with. Now, you tied yourselves to Israel to the point that you can't extricate yourselves now. So now it's sinking you. Israel and the pathological obsession with colonization that fuels your bad romance with Israel is burning America's standing both globally and domestically. Your whole narrative about yourselves is getting ripped to shreds. The gown of the Statue of Liberty has been removed, and it's like that scene from The Crying Game, where everyone suddenly realizes that you weren't who you said you were. Now, America seduced the world into thinking that they're Marilyn Monroe, but they turned out to be Marilyn Manson. Nobody wants to play along anymore. Nobody sympathizes with your fatal attraction to Zionism, and no one has to put up with it anymore. Moving on Rafah did nothing but expose the fact that Israel and America's options are completely exhausted. I thought that Biden had suspended shipments of bombs to Israel, but that's not going to amount to anything with your electorate. That's like a cheating husband telling his wife that he's going to keep seeing his mistress, but he just won't send her flowers on Valentine's Day. It's too little too late. Glenn Close has already boiled your kid's pet rabbit, and you're still trying to tell us that she's got a good heart. No, at this point, America can only do one thing to recover any credibility on the global stage, and that's to actively and aggressively stop Israel. Cutting ties, just cutting ties, isn't going to be enough at this point. You need to impose a no-fly zone over Gaza, impose more sanctions against Israel than you imposed against Russia. You need to demand immediate IAEA inspections of Israel's nuclear facilities. You need to revoke the American citizenship of every Israeli dual citizen and seize all Israeli assets in America and Europe. You need to take Netanyahu to the ICC yourself. Join the South African case at the ICJ. Ban Israeli media. Treat the Israeli flag the same way that you treat the swastika. Designate the IDF as a terrorist organization and Israel as a state sponsor of terrorism. And if that doesn't do the trick, then you need to launch a shock and awe campaign against Israel the same way that you did against Iraq, the same way you did against Libya and Afghanistan and so on, and bomb them back to the Stone Age, because that's what you do, isn't it? Isn't that supposed to be the American way? But we all know you'll never do that. And because we all know that you'll never do that, we all know that you have never meant a single word that you said. And that's why no one is ever going to listen to you again. The only thing that you can possibly do to salvage yourself is something that we all know that you will never do. So you've been found out. You've been exposed. Your cover has been blown. The audience for all your speeches about democracy and liberty and human rights are filing out of the building, and we've turned off your microphone. Oh, you've passed the Rubicon of hypocrisy at this point. There's no going back now. The world is moving on, knowing what we know. And no matter how much you repeat your completely bankrupt narrative, you can't make us unknow what we know about you. America is a train wreck that collided with a dumpster fire, and you're trying to put that fire out with oil and plutonium, and everyone wants to get as far away from you as possible.